I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications at the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Sorry for being late this morning. This is our press briefing for the 22nd of March, 2022 of the resumed sessions of Substa 24, SBI-3, and the third meeting of the Open-Ended Working Group on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Process. So for the first of all, the working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework met yesterday. They had the second session of their Contact Group 3. Now that group is looking at targets 9 through 13. They were able to look at targets 9 and 10 in a fairly slow progress, but they made a bit of progress. Much support was for the non-paper that was there as well. And indeed, the interventions did add a great deal to the text when they decided to establish a small group. This shows what's going on with some of the discussions. We're getting a great deal of textual additions to the targets and the documents overall, and it's to the point where delegates have to figure out how to manage this and move it forward. Today, for the working group, we'll have a plenary in the morning. Let me start again. Yesterday, they had a plenary on the question of digital sequence information. This was the first introduction of the text. There were many interventions. The item was meant to take 1 hour, and it took them all of 3 hours to get all the different interventions as well. The interventions were very constructive, but they showed a great variety of different opinions on it as well. And so the idea is that there needs to be possibly a step-by-step approach to deal with the complexities of this issue, and parties were asking for a very clear timetable on how this could be addressed in advance of the UN Biodiversity Conference. Remember that we had some parties that indicated that unless there's some resolution of the DSI issue, it would be hard for them to support the Global Biodiversity Framework, and others said, well, we need to make sure we take the proper time to address that. So there's a non-paper for this issue of DSI based on those extensive comments. That's expected to be produced, then put out this afternoon. So the working group will meet this afternoon. They will look at targets 14 to 21. That's going to be covered in the contact group. Just to remind you, those targets 14 to 21 are about the overall support mechanisms to make sure that we can achieve the effective outcomes for the global biodiversity framework. For the scientific body, Substa, SBSTTA, they met yesterday. They continued to look at the monitoring framework. So the contact group reconvened under the co-chairs or co-leads of Alfred Oteng-Yeboah and Andrew Stott. So they managed to look at the monitoring framework for targets 20 and 21, and also 7 and 8. 2 non-papers will be prepared. They've made great progress, and as you know, I've discussed this in other areas where they've used a traffic light system so that the parties can make an evaluation of whether or not the proposed indicators are considered reliable, whether or not there's data at the global level, data at the national level, and if it's effective. So they're moving forward in that, but there's a lot more progress that's needed to do. There's only one more session planned for this group, so there might be a challenge. And it's pretty clear that there may need to be intercessional work that will deal with this issue. And intercessional means between this meeting and the biodiversity conference that's planned for later on, so we'll see. For Substa, they will have more work now on marine and coastal biodiversity. It's going to continue today. So the marine and coastal biodiversity work is looking at both the question of sustainable use of biodiversity in marine and coastal ecosystems, and then also the question of EBSAs, which are so-called ecologically and biologically significant areas in the high seas. And so there's a CRP, a conference room paper on EBSAs, that will be covered today. SBI, the report we have is that the contact group on resource mobilization met. They're more than halfway through the document now, but they've run out of time. So I think what they're going to be doing is that they will send that document to the plenary as a CRP and hope that the remaining issues can be resolved in that. The financial mechanism discussions will have their second contact group tonight. Again, it's very slow progress, and again, there may be more work needed in this meeting, possibly intercessionally, because they may certainly run out of time. So for the SBI, the plenary will be held today. There'll be a report back from the contact groups, and then the first reading on the capacity building, the Nagoya Protocol, review of effectiveness, etc. So there's a lot of it. In general, what's to be said is that the parties are making good progress, but at the same time, the text is very heavy. There's a compilation of a lot of views, and it's not clear there's enough time to get a lot of things done. And so a lot of the discussion amongst the regions is how can they get as much done possible here in this meeting, but then what work has to be reserved for the interim period. Let's see, I guess the only other thing to comment here is just on the COVID situation. As of today, there were a total of 25 confirmed cases of COVID amongst the delegates. 11 of those have recovered, so we're only up to 14, and there are just 2 new cases today. So, we're looking at, a number of people as well, but it's not a very large explosion of cases. And indeed, many of those people are able to participate online, if possible. So that's what I have for today for you. I encourage you to look at the plenary sessions online, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning, hopefully 9:15 Geneva time, as long as the Bureau doesn't go too long. Thanks. I'm David Ainsworth. Good, perfect.
Thanks.